Okay. Yeah. Whoa. Thanks for first century. It's over. Oh, it's over, she says. This is by R2Bs. And it's over. She's had it. It's enough. She's a 21st century girl. So, you know, she doesn't want you. She just tells you it. And that's how it's going. That's the words to the song. R2Bs is a Ghanaian band. There are a lot of nice Ghanaian bands making beautiful music. And very soon, maybe Ghana will be the capital of music. We used to be, you know, we started High Life. And then from High Life, we've moved on to Hip Life.
That's right.
So we're musical. I view myself as a girl from the musical city. Yeah, mate. Yeah, I'm musical. Anyway, good evening, listeners. Hello and welcome to Kiki's Chat Show. Today, I have with me Nana Asante. She's been here before and she comes here monthly to talk politics. Nana Asante is a former mayor of Harrow. She, between 2013 and 2014.
That's right.
If you don't know about her, I'm telling you how wonderful she is. She's knowledgeable on a lot of things. And one of the good traits she has is she shares the knowledge calmly and wonderfully and beautifully. If you don't know things about politics, you ask Nana, she will tell you and give you analogies as well, which then helps it stick in your noggin. Noggin is head if you're not English. Yes. So anyway, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes. Nana Asante and I made a connection a few months? Or a while ago.
Yeah.
And so we started chatting about politics and how she got into being a mayor, how she's conducted things, her career, and all of that. So she came on and told us about it. Do you remember?
I do. Yeah.
Yes. So should we do a kind of a recap to remind people about
That's a good idea.
all of the things that we've been talking about? We have to make it fast because today is an interesting day for us in the UK, and we're going to thrash it out.
Okay.
Yes. So now, Nana Asante, I can give you a small synopsis of her. She's somebody who has really worked hard at whatever she was doing, and she's gone through the system and she is at a point where I think a lot of women would like to be at, but she's worked really hard. She didn't get it on a silver platter apart from education.
Yeah, we all had to work for it.
Yes.
Where we get.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's worked really hard, and she's been a mayor, she's a mother, she is a grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time we spoke, she had 3 grandchildren, and now she has
A 4th.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. And so she's a fellowship group leader, a chaplain of First Stanmore Girls Brigade. She was a Labour councillor from 2002 to 2013. That's about 11 years in Harrow. She was in the Independent Labour Group, Mayor of Harrow. She, all of these things she's done. She chairs Harrow Fairtrade campaign.
Exactly.
And we are going to talk about fair trade today. Today, the topic really is Brexit, fair trade, and GMOs. And we're going to do it all in a nutshell.
Fantastic.
We only have an hour, so we will kind of go through it. If anyone has a question, if you're there and you want to talk, want to ask something, the studio line is 0203 735 8820 or 0203 286 0185. So there we are. Now, one of the things we talked about was the way that you got there, and you were giving advice to other young women on how
To get into politics.
Yeah, do you want to remind them again?
And it's the advice is to young men as well.
Yeah.
Because what I'll say is that, in fact, when it comes to people of African heritage, men are underrepresented.
Indeed.
So we do need them to also step up.
Yes.
One of the first things, if you want to get into politics, local council like I was, you need to ideally join a political party.
Okay.
Because that's the easiest way to get elected. Because when you are in a political party, what happens is that the party machinery helps you get, the nitty-gritty done. Because to be elected to council, the ward in which you're standing, 10 resident voters need to sign your ballot paper.
Okay.
Or your nomination paper. And that
10
makes
resident voters
from that ward.
Okay.
And that's what makes you a candidate. So once you are on the ballot paper, then of course people can vote for you. And the campaigning, each ward, and for those who don't know, a ward is a little part of your borough. And the ward is usually about 4,000 homes, about 8,000 voters. And they are the people who vote. So you have to canvass that lot. So can you imagine if you're doing it on your own as an independent, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
If the party is helping you, you got party people to go around voting, leafleting, etc. And that helps you. But that's how you actually stand for election.
I see.
Yeah.
So people, as you heard, you join a ward, you join a particular party, the party that you're affiliated to, and then through that, if you have a community spirit, which I know that a lot of Ghanaians have, you can start going to meetings, and then from meetings, 10 voters.
Yeah, basically the rule is that to get on the ballot paper, 10 people who are voters in that particular ward have to sign it. The truth is that, like everything else, politics with a small p kicks in. If you join a party, there's the usual human, I think people like people and people dislike some people.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're joining a party, don't join alone. Join with your posse.
A few friends.
Exactly.
And then they will be your backup.
Absolutely. Because in order to become a candidate, if you're in a party, what's important is that the party selects its candidates and you have to be shortlisted and that kind of thing. So the party, and each party is slightly different. I know about the way the Labour Party does it. But what it is that in order to be a candidate, you have to be shortlisted. The ward members decide who's going to represent them. And there's a vote. And of course, with all of these things, it becomes who you know.
Yeah.
And it becomes who thinks, because although it's supposed to be on merit, and you go and you stand there and speak for 3 minutes, telling them who you are and what you're going to do, the reality is that some people who I'm sure you've seen some of the candidates we have as who've been elected. Some of them, they ought not to be there.
But they had backup.
They have backup. And that's the way the system works. So I'd say that those people with the qualities that we need, because let's face it, all communities, we need people who can champion our cause.
Yes.
So we do need a better caliber of people standing for election, whether it's local election or even members of parliament.
Yeah.
But then that's up to us, because people don't like putting themselves forward. And I would say that is what there's a gap. We need people like your good self to decide that actually I'll serve the community, I'll put myself forward.
Like me?
Yes, like you.
Oh my gosh.
Definitely like you.
I don't know, but at the moment I think radio is good enough for me.
You can do that
And
cancel.
and go to work.
Yeah, because a lot of people do maybe 3 jobs.
Oh wow.
So they work a full-time job. They might have something like the radio. People have their own hobbies, and they stand for council. Because remember, I think, was it, I've forgotten which Greek, one of these Greek sages said that.
Socrates.
Exactly. That if you do not get involved in politics, then you condemn yourself to be ruled by your inferiors.
A foolish man.
Exactly. So in a sense, in a way, we deserve the governments we have.
Yeah.
We need to step up.
We also talked about women in power, women who've done really well, women who've done a few first things like black women. You mentioned Baroness Scotland.
Yes, Baroness Scotland, an extraordinary woman, because when you think of it, to be in school, and sometimes people act as if racism just emerged.
Yeah.
It's been there for generations.
Fact,
I don't know if you've seen a clip on YouTube going around. It's an interview of John Barnes, the footballer, talking about racism because of what happened with Raheem Sterling and all that. In a sense, people have forgotten that just because it doesn't come in the news doesn't mean it's not there.
True.
And what they do to our young people is they tend to how would I say, push down their ambition.
You dumb them down.
Thank you. So dumb them down, one, but also dissuade them from aiming high.
Yeah.
And she wanted to be a lawyer right from the outset. And what did they tell her? Ooh, what do you do on Saturdays? And she said, she works in Sainsbury's. Or if you work very hard, you could become a supervisor. But she was lucky she had a family that was behind her. And she went home and told them, and they laughed and said, oh, you don't know what they told me. And basically, she was encouraged to strive for what she wanted to be. And lo and behold, she became the first woman of any community to become Attorney General. And that is quite an achievement.
It is. Now, when you talk about 2 things, because we did talk about racism on the show as well, but it's very good that you've brought it all together with Baroness Scotland and all, because I kind of feel that one of the things you're saying, which I hope listeners are hearing, is that we have to stand for ourselves. We can't allow other people to speak for us, because whilst other people are speaking for us, they're not saying the things that we want them to say. So I feel that if there's anyone out there who is interested in politics, who wants to make that strike, who wants to talk and help other people, other black people, please come forward. Go to your local, find out who your community person is. Find out, go to the council, ask questions, and then from there you will know what ward you're in. In fact,
Google it.
Or
Google it.
We all vote. So if you have a vote, your ward will be on your voting sheet. So once you make friends, you find out these people, then you take your neighbors and friends with you to meetings, offer them tea and biscuits.
Absolutely.
And you're in.
You see, you're natural. You understand the lingo. You're natural. No, you're natural. It is about building community. It's about connections. And in fact, sometimes people make politics a mystery. It isn't. It's just about getting to know people, getting like-minded people to be on side, and pushing an agenda, hopefully for the benefit of more than just your own little community.
Worldwide and that sort of thing. That's good. Then we had a chat about politics, what it means. What does politics mean? Basically, Do people want to? You see, I think politics isn't everything. Just
It
buying
is.
a loaf of bread is politics.
It is. In fact, in a way, you touched on. We had a debate on in I think was it on the 6th of December, which is last week Thursday,
Yeah.
and is fair trade political?
Okay.
And it was our annual fair trade debate, and we had it at the House of Commons. And actually, you've hit the nail on the head. Everything is political. What you choose to buy or not to buy
It's
is a political
move.
act. So if people go into a shop and pick a fair trade item as opposed to another item, in a sense, they're making a political statement.
Yeah.
I mean, fair trade some time ago came up with this card
Okay.
that if your food, if exploitation left a mark on your food, would you still buy it? And in a sense, that's what fair trade is saying, that let's stop the exploitation. When you're shopping, look for products that actually benefit the producer, the farmer, and their community. And that's what it is. So the debate was interesting. It was a group of us that met, and the answer was unequivocally yes. Fair trade is political.
Now, people, if you remember, when we said I asked, what is fair trade? And you said fair trade was about better prices, decent working conditions, and fair terms for the people who
produce the food we
Yes.
buy or the things we like.
Yes. Now, for example, we have a lot of cocoa farmers. I am a granddaughter of a massive cocoa farmer. You know, I mean, he had other accolades, but I'll just deal with the cocoa for now. So, cocoa is big time in a lot of Ghanaian families, you know, people, and yet Ghana is not rich. In the Western world, everybody eats chocolate. Chocolate is big time. And so how come that there's so much saturated chocolate here? There are chocolate mountains, fountains, chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. And yet we who produce the chocolate,
the cocoa that
the cocoa that produces the chocolate, we're poor. Our farmers are poor.
But the thing is, you've hit the nail on the head again. It's basically that we are impoverished as opposed to being poor. Somebody else sets the terms of world trade.
Indeed.
And the system is unfair. And that is what fair trade was set up to, in a sense, attack. Because the terms of trade are so unfair that producers get a pittance. So with fair trade, what it is that they set a fair trade price, which is a price which is generous in that it tries to address the costs of production. So the fair trade price, when you get it, you're usually getting more. You can get higher than the world price because one thing that you never get is below the fair trade price if you sell on fair trade terms. And then what you also get is a fair trade premium, and that premium helps you and your community decide what to do with that premium. So whether it's a better machine to dry coffee, whether it's a clinic, whether it's a school block, whatever it is or whether it's water, clean water, your community decides what is essential. So you are deciding as opposed to somebody else sitting in London or New York telling you what you ought to have. And that's what is powerful about fair trade. It's a very empowering way of dealing with, of changing the terms of trade, which is why it's political. Because in a sense, what we had last year was Sainsbury's deciding that, they thought they knew better. So instead of having fair trade, they were going with fairly traded. And fairly traded was their own thing. It wasn't quite the fair trade standard. It was mimicking it. And like anything that's counterfeit, it's not the real McCoy. So we campaigned against it. And we said, ditching fair trade is not my cup of tea. And the campaign was successful in that what we've noticed is that Sainsbury's has not pushed on other items. They've kept their fairly traded. So I'll tell people, it is a political act. Buy fair trade tea, don't buy fairly traded tea. It's not the same thing.
Okay, so people, listeners, buy fair trade tea. Fair trade.
Fair trade, one word, fair trade.
Fair trade, there is a green sign. Have
Absolutely,
you got it? Yeah.
We've got it. You
For
can
those
see it on here.
On Facebook, this is it. You can see it's a green and a bluish thing.
That's
it's
right.
got fair trade on it.
Absolutely.
Buy fair trade. Fair trade will help our people.
Yeah.
It will help our families, you know, extended.
It helps our communities.
Yeah, our community and in the whole country as a whole.
Exactly.
Us and Ivory Coast and everybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have here with me Nana Asante. She is an ex-mayor of Harrow. She's a politician. She is fully charged and firing on all cylinders. Today we are catching up on all the things we talked about before we enter into the discussion of Brexit. We've done Fairtrade now.
Yeah, we
So
have.
yeah, you know, so this is
The
fun.
only thing I'll add is Fairtrade is 25 years old next year.
Is
So
it?
that look at it, they've been working for 25 years, and that people shouldn't think it's only chocolate. Apart from coffee and
yes.
tea, there's wine,
Yes.
there's gold, and there are 5,000 items.
Actually, I know something about Fairtrade. I know when Fairtrade started.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was started in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And, you know, it all began with needlework. When they were sewing, people were making these mats and all of
Okay.
that. But other foreigners were buying it at their own prices. So people decided that, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. We do the work. This is what it costs. Buy it or leave it. And people started buying it. And slowly, people realized that fair trade had power.
Absolutely.
And so they started putting it into, you know, things that are done in villages all over the world. Towns, women's work, you know,
Yeah.
this needlework, farming, etc., etc. Yes, I've done my homework.
Fantastic. And we
So-
just didn't mention Divine Chocolate. Divine Chocolate is
Yes.
going to be 20 years old next year.
Good Lord.
And Ghanaian farmers own 44% of that factory.
I want them to own like
But what is good about it,
75.
yeah, but what is good about it, this was also on fair trade principles. So they
Okay.
gain 4 times.
No.
They sell fair trade cocoa.
Mhm.
They get a dividend when the company does well.
Mhm.
They get a fair trade premium.
Mhm.
And they sit on the board. And therefore
Excellent.
they decide what happens. So
Yes.
Kwapa Cocoa, the cooperative in Ghana,
Mhm.
owns a part of that factory.
That's
And
excellent.
it has survived the recession,
Mhm.
the 2008 crash.
Mhm.
And the company is going strong. I think the turnover last year was 14 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
14 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if the farmers will get some.
They do,
Because,
they do.
you know,
They sit on the board. Like
yeah,
I said,
yeah.
they are owners, they're part owners of the factory. And in a sense, it's a model of how you can change the system that is. Because the system that is right now, you can see, for example, Maltesers
Mhm.
is fair trade. It has, and not all of it, but it has the
Wow.
label. However, we don't own, our farmers don't own a portion of the factory.
No.
And if they decide they're not buying fair trade anymore, they are developing their own ethical standard, then we are out in the cold. In a way, I like the divine model because it is about empowerment of our people, as well as, you know, trying to meet the same market standards. And you'll find divine chocolate in different places. You find it in Waitrose, you find it in, you know, you can find it
in
on
Sainsbury's.
Exactly. It is a brand that it meets the same taste buds. So, because the European taste bud is like, I'll say the UK especially, their chocolate,
It's very sweet.
because it's full of milk. If you notice other chocolate, whether it's Swiss chocolate, etc., there's more cocoa
in it.
So the
Yeah.
cocoa butter is a higher percentage. And maybe that brings us to Brexit and why maybe the UK doesn't get on as well as it should with its European partners.
Do you think that was it? The first question I need to ask you was, because we haven't actually talked much Brexit
Sure.
on this show. So first of all, people need to understand, what is Brexit?
Brexit is about Britain wanting an exit out of Europe.
Okay.
Britain had a referendum in 1975 to join what was then the European Economic Community. What maybe a lot of Brits didn't understand is that the European project has always been about a political and economic union. But I think for a lot of people, you know, referenda tend to be simple. Do you want to join the common market? And that was what it was known as. So to them, it was a trade market for a lot of them. They didn't understand that it was about, for a lot of Europe, the war. You know, when you look at it, the Second World War didn't actually come to Britain. Yes, we had the Blitz. We were bombed to smithereens. But we didn't have a German invasion, apart from, I think, the Channel Islands. So they didn't come. The rest of Europe had a different experience.
Oh, yes.
They had the Germans there, they had the SS, they had the Gestapo. And war, war creates chaos.
Yes.
So one of the things that came after the war is that we will do something to prevent there ever being a war again. Because what people forget is that the war was about resources. There'd been a scramble for Africa. I mean, our dear friends, our European brothers and sisters, sat in Berlin and drew lines
and
through
shared
us as if we didn't, we had no say in the matter.
No.
They just shared. And of course, Germany was squeezed out. The people who took the lion's share were Britain and France.
Yeah.
So Germany decided, well, since the resources, for that's another thing, Africa is the richest continent.
It is.
We have the raw material. So they were fighting over it. So that, in a sense, is what it was about. So they decided that, we are not going to be left out. We will fight for our share. So they fought, and unfortunately for them, they lost. Having lost, Britain then shared, and France then shared their I'll say, their possessions. So, for example, Togoland, which was German, was split into one line right through it, passing through people's houses. And half went to what was then Britain, running the Gold Coast. The other half went to France. So what you have now, you have people who, in a sense, maybe why for a lot of Africa, the borders don't make sense.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah. So in a sense, what I'm saying is that Brexit was about, in a way, before Brexit, pre-Brexit, you had the wars.
Yeah.
So this was, let us never have a war again.
So they would come together, and they would be like brothers and sisters and a few
and
cousins
trade
in Russia,
and you would
trade.
rather than use guns, which is what the war, First and Second World Wars was about, you would actually sit on the at the table and thrash out. So that's why you have a council of ministers where elected ministers from each country meet and thrash things out. You have a European Parliament where we elect people who go into the European Parliament and decide on so many things. But Britain, first of all, came into the EU very late. Didn't seem to understand that it was serious business. It was about thrashing out what we think is fair, how we do business, what the rules are.
Yeah.
The cynics say that the reason Brexit, which is Britain voting to leave the EU, why the whole campaign, partly because Europe was passing a law about tax evasion.
Okay.
And this thing about tax evasion was also about how people would cooperate across borders to stop this, this thing that some of the rich do, in that they don't pay their share of money. They keep on saying things like, oh, but we made our own money. They forget that when they're using the roads, we all paid for the roads.
The bins.
Thank you, the bins. Also, when they're employing people, we all educate the people. Our taxes are what put the people in schools. When it's the health service. So they can't say they did it on their own. We contributed. So they need to pay their share. But they don't, in a way, a lot of people don't see why they should pay their share. So some people, the cynics, say that the reason why there was this push by rich people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others to leave is because they were protecting their interests. And we, the ordinary people, should have looked after our own interests.
We were bamboozled. You see, one of the things on this show, I would come here. This is before the voting of the Brexit, and I would say to people, please be careful. Do not listen to those who are talking immigration and saying it's for the Eastern Europeans. Think about yourself and know it that, you cannot vote to leave. If you vote to leave, we'll all be in problems.
Absolutely.
Of course, they didn't listen to me.
And they voted.
And I had this Nigerian friend who was saying, well, Brexit is important and we must leave because all these Eastern Europeans coming in. And I'm looking at him thinking,
what's wrong with you?
What is wrong with you? These people, at certain times, they don't even think of an Eastern European. You're the one with a different color.
Absolutely. You know, again, people forget that the very comments they made about Eastern Europeans were comments that were made about
Them.
about our parents who came in the 40s and 50s and 20s. And whenever, you know, we've had people, and people, instead of looking at what the actual thing is, a lot of the Eastern Europeans who come, in fact, have been the backbone of our NHS, of our farming community. When it comes to picking vegetables, even pre-Europe, they were the ones coming across and picking. The thing about Europe is that it's a dual-edged sword. Europe can be used to exploit, and it can also be used to improve, I'll say, working conditions for everybody. So the social chapter was about making sure that nobody was exploited, was about giving workers rights. And that was what, I'll say, some of the right-winger neoliberal didn't like. They felt, oh, this is the nanny state. But actually, when you've got this huge market of, 600 million people, it is good that we have rules right across the board.
Yeah.
So that is what Europe was about. But you're right, people voted Brexit for many reasons.
For different reasons.
Some people felt that way the Commonwealth will gain ascendancy. And I used to tell people, we were in the Commonwealth and we went into Europe.
Yeah.
If we were, and they should also have remembered that the way, and to put a color on it, the way the white Commonwealth was treated and the way the other Commonwealth was different.
Yes.
Or the old Commonwealth and the new Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And some people refuse to see that. So now, but again, another thing that I think is unfair is they haven't said how close the vote was. The vote, it wasn't like we had 2/3 majority to leave. So there is the vote wasn't a decisive vote, which is why you have rumblings right now. Those who voted Remain are rightly saying, well, this Brexit, we knew is going to cause havoc. And I think now some people are realizing just how far-reaching. We've been in Europe for over 40 years. So you've got things that we have in common, like even our cancer drugs, you know, the things that come for cancer, our antibiotics, the stocks of our supermarkets. Most
These
businesses,
shops, Lidl, Aldi, they're all foreign shops.
But then we even have our Tesco's and our Sainsbury's, etc. They all operate just in time, which is supposed to be the best way of managing. So they don't have huge warehouses. The goods come
in fresh,
ready to go to be distributed to the various places. So right now the problem will be that if we don't negotiate a good Brexit, then we're going to have chaos in the shops. I must say, I was cooking for Film Club on Friday, and I was looking for roast potatoes. Can you believe there were no roast potatoes? And I was like, this is mad. Is this sort of precursor of what we're going to have? That you have shortages, and those of us who've been in countries where there are acute shortages, where things aren't in the supermarket,
and
is this what we're going to...
petrol, queuing for petrol.
I don't know if we'll be queuing for petrol because we've got North Sea and whatnot, but I think certain things that we didn't realize were affected by Brexit are going to affect our lives. Very much so.
I'm very concerned. Now, would you say that it's the fault of Cameron?
I think he needs to take responsibility.
You know, I was hesitating, but I said
yeah, but it is true. He needs to take responsibility because he was prime minister at the time. He was warned that when you're making big constitutional change, you should put in a 2/3 clause, because you don't change things that have been there, set in stone for a number of years on just a simple majority. He was, I think, arrogant in that he didn't think it was necessary. But for the good of the country, he should have made it a 2/3 majority, which Brexit didn't get. So now we are changing this whole country. We're causing all this upset on a simple majority. And it's a simple majority that hasn't even been thought through. So you've got the NHS right now. 90% of our EU citizens didn't come back after 2016. You know, people go home for Christmas. They decided that they don't need this hustle. And it's also because people have forgotten that there's an upsurge of racism. There's an upsurge of racial harassment. And for Eastern European, there was even one murder. I don't know if you know that there was a Polish guy who was beat up and he died. So that you know, for those of us who are a different color and have been facing racism and have learned to cope with it, we know maybe how to survive. Racism is wrong no matter who it affects. But if you're not used to it, and you're not, and in a sense, I think Brexit allowed, or it lifted the lid on things that were not permissible.
Let me tell you how I view Brexit.
Okay.
Brexit, when it came on, it was being Nigel Farage, that man from that
UKIP.
horrible party. And his whole agenda, it seemed, was to pander to the people in a certain area. And those people, the minute racism comes up and the talk of immigration and that, they are very passionate in trying to remove our people from Britain, because the majority of them are illiterates. They don't even know the story of how
we came here.
It's not even how we came here, but what they took from us that made them great.
Thank you. And also the fact is that, but there's a book that said, we're here because you were there. The
Yes.
reason why I said why we came here, they came dancing in our countries, making us decisions on maps while they sat in Berlin in the 1800s, deciding, and they caused this, we were living our lives, bless you, we're living our lives quite, they decided that they would turn the whole world into their playground. It's a consequence of their colonial adventures,
Indeed.
imperial adventures, that we are here.
Yes.
It's also, we talked about fair trade, it's also about the unfair terms of trade.
Indeed.
If things continue as unfair as they are, people have a right to live. It's a human right to be able to put body and soul together. So that's why people move. Migration happens when things are unfair, when the situation is untenable. I often tell people that the shocking thing that maybe if they did more fair trade, there'll be less immigration. If immigration
Yes.
bothers them so much,
Yeah.
pay people
Pay
fairly.
for the cocoa, pay for, and give
Pay.
us back our artifacts like the golden stool, the this, the that, and the other. And when you have got and send back the Elgin marbles to Greece, and do all these things that you've stolen, plundered, pillaged, we will all follow our things and go back.
And we would come on holiday and go
yeah,
back.
and
You could come on holiday and go back.
No,
No, do you remember? I don't know if you remember. I remember we of a certain age. There was a time when Ghanaians didn't need a visa to come to the UK.
Yes.
And I remember students used to come. At that time, things were better. Students used to come on holiday here, and all they did was shop and go back home.
Yes.
They came on charter
Buy
flights.
their shoes.
Nobody was
and everything.
interested in living here.
staying.
And I often tell
Our
people,
countries-
with the beaches we have and the beautiful surf we have, who in their right mind comes and freezes here when they could be sitting in the sun?
Indeed.
And when the sun is too hot, you're sitting in air conditioning. Why would you do it? But it's because our economies are upside down, partly because who decides the terms of trade? You do.
Well, as we're speaking, Mrs. May has won the vote.
Okay, she won a vote of confidence.
Vote of confidence, so nobody can try and
Correction.
all
The
right.
Conservatives, they have a rule. This was an internal Conservative Party vote of no confidence.
Okay.
So now that they've had this vote, she can't be challenged in the Conservative Party for 12 months. So for a
Okay.
year, she's safe.
But
However,
Labour.
no, Parliament
Parliament, okay.
can challenge her. So if her Brexit is not passed, because she's brought a deal to the table and it's come to Parliament, she was supposed to have the vote, I think, yesterday. And she postponed the vote because she was going to lose it. If now,
Really?
yeah, she postponed the vote.
How do you know I'm going to lose it today? Maybe tomorrow I'll win it. How does that
She
work?
might not win it tomorrow because it's the deal that people are not happy with.
Okay.
Even the DUP that she paid that 1 billion to have their vote, they've told her they're not voting for it. Because it was a confidence and supply vote. So they choose on each vote, they examine it and see if they like it to vote for it.
Okay.
There are on the Labour benches, there are some who will do anything against Corbyn. So I'll be honest, I don't think some of them have any loyalty. So they will vote for anything Theresa May rather than support Corbyn. However, yeah, that's politics for you. There's some people who don't understand what the change is, why Corbyn is so popular amongst the grassroots. In a sense, if you look at what's happening in France, Macron having to backtrack because the people are on the street, then it's to understand the neoliberal experiment is over. you cannot go on squeezing ordinary people.
No, but France has a history, though.
But
they had the revolution, and they had all of this. So France, they get very passionate into their politics.
They do, but then even then, they voted for Macron. So he thought it gave him a license to raise fuel prices, to squeeze taxes, to do all that. But he gave tax, again, the neoliberal thing, gave tax breaks to the rich. The French said enough is enough. We're not having it.
No.
So he's had to backtrack. Because he thought, okay, the choice is between Marine Le Pen and him. Because they voted for him, he can do what he likes. Well, the French have told him no. But what I'm saying is that if you look throughout Europe, there are two frightening things.
Yeah.
The far right is on the rise.
Yeah.
And so the far right, these nasty people who are xenophobic, racist, they are on the rise. However, at the same time, you also have a left-wing resurgence where people are saying, look, people before profit.
Yeah.
And that is the Corbyn school.
Yeah.
That people matter more than making money on everybody's, all these cuts we've had, all this austerity. Where is it taking us? We are suffering for what? That has to stop. So we are hoping that, in a way, if there is a vote in the House that goes against it, and she is unseated because people just don't like her Brexit deal, we could have a Corbyn-led government. And Corbyn, in my view, if he goes to Europe, he will be negotiating with a socialist group so that there'll be a different type of Brexit, if we must have Brexit.
But you see, this is where we come to my question, because a few people have been asking, what is the difference? There's a soft Brexit and a hard Brexit.
A hard Brexit is quite silly. In a sense, a hard Brexit is saying, we really don't care, we are leaving, we won't negotiate. A soft Brexit, you're looking at the fact that, we've been cooperating on this for 40 years. So rather than just shut the door and leave and to hell with the consequences, you ease off slowly. So for example, our universities have been cooperating with universities in Europe. There are deals, there are contracts going and training things going for 7 years. Hard Brexit, you don't care about that, you just walk out. A soft Brexit, you take into account all your obligations. And when people say the divorce bill, they need to grow up. If you signed an agreement with somebody and you're leaving halfway through the agreement, there's still obligations.
Yeah.
People have made decisions based on that agreement you signed.
Yes.
And I think what people forget is, if you walk away with a hard Brexit, who will trust you in a trade agreement? Well, your reputation will be shot.
But I think people have already started, companies are moving out. Big companies, people are going back to France, wherever. Companies that are here are trying to take their headquarters elsewhere. And I don't even know why we're talking about it, but the important thing for our listeners to know is that all of this affects all of us.
It does.
So people should become aware that they have to pay attention to what is happening around them. If it comes to us taking our bags and going back to whence we came from, then we will have to think seriously about.
Yeah, I think it's something that we must make sure that we have somewhere to go to. Well, yeah, because sometimes we've allowed our countries of origin also to become, I suppose, less than what they was. These were places that were going places. And then suddenly now we've allowed this whole neoliberal, I don't know if you remember, structural adjustment program, which was the austerity that they tried on us first. When they thought they could get away with it, they brought it here. So sometimes when something is happening to somebody and you ignore it, tomorrow it will happen to you.
Yes.
So they have privatized everything out of sight in Ghana, for example. And that is the World Bank attitude. Everything is privatized, neoliberal, etc. It doesn't work. Because privatization can work to a point. I mean, look at, if I give an example of the private sector here. Do you remember BHS, British Home Stores?
Yes, I do remember BHS.
Wasn't it in private hands?
I bought a polo neck from
Okay, wasn't it in private hands?
Yes.
What happened to it?
It vanished from the scene.
It vanished from the scene because again, whether in private or public hands, it's about the caliber of management, it's about the vision of management, whether they care enough about both the workers and about the customers. Obviously, Philip Green didn't care. He managed to buy another yacht. You didn't need a third
he
yacht.
He moved into Topshop.
He was there already. To be fair, he had Topshop already.
Topshop,
and then he went into BHS. They had, I think, a pension pot of 600 million. It's all gone. It's the kind of, so when people say private sector good, public sector bad, they should look at history and look at, it's about whether or not whoever is managing the business is thinking of the people, both the customers and the people who work in it. That is what is important.
This is why I wonder about the train lines. You know, at the moment we're having big issues with the trains, and it was privatized at some point. And I think really it is management. It is management, and it's management from all the way from the top coming down. People are not paying attention. People are not doing their work properly. And then somewhere it affects us, the commuters, the people who use the trains. And,
but you need to remember, if you've decided that the only thing that matters is the profit margin, then the managers are managing it properly. They are managing it to make profit for the shareholders. They don't care about the customers. If, on the other hand, we all agree that a train should be able to carry people from A to B at a reasonable cost and in comfort, then your reason for running it changes. So maybe that's what we as a people need to say, that actually we don't want these profit running trains. We want them, yes, to cover the costs, but we want them to look at the workers, the people who work in it, and the passengers, that we deserve better. So then maybe we need to do what I'll say the socialists are saying, take it back into public ownership and change the reason why you run it. And the interesting thing, have you noticed that France, Germany, all have publicly owned trains, and they come and buy ours and use ours to subsidize theirs. So if we haven't cottoned on by now,
we haven't. We don't. We think we are the smartest, and with time, things are just getting worse and worse.
And therefore, we have to draw a line in the sand. We need a change. We need to actually, I know, for example, they say things like, oh, Corbyn is loony left. Actually, he's not. It's about who is more important. Is it people or is it money?
I think when you say that, I think that the problem actually is the media and the way that they report the issues. So you have the media who are on the side of the capital and the Tory party. So continually they're calling Corbyn this and Corbyn that. Meanwhile, they're doing all the evil things in the background, and yet they're shouting that, hey, look, it's a decoy. People need to read between the lines.
Actually.
People need to pay attention to their own lives. We don't. We are always looking outside and blaming other people for things that we should be taking responsibility for.
Absolutely. We all need to take responsibility. You're 100% right. And we need to get involved. We need to be more interested. And we need sometimes to take different media sources. So for example, listen to Al Jazeera, listen to RT, listen to Press TV, as well as the BBC. And then also go online. Listen to the discussions, and then come to the truth is somewhere in between all that.
And listen to GN Radio. GN Radio.
Exactly.
Yeah, listen to Kiki's chat show. We're giving you nuggets, diamond.
Amen to that. No, it's good. I think you're right that we need to talk about independent radio stations like GN Radio and other things, and we need to then look at it that actually let's discuss the issues from our perspective. The hostile environment didn't happen by accident. We all sat there, Brexit, that whole xenophobia coming up, the racism, and the hostile environment, and the 2014 Immigration Act went through Parliament.
Nobody knew, nobody looked, but it was out there.
It was out there, and I'll say that at the same time, I'll say 6 Labour MPs voted against it. Corbyn, Dan Abbott, John McDonnell, Dennis Skinner, Fiona McTaggart, and Mark, whatever his, 6 Labour MPs
voted
against it. The rest of them, where were they? So those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. That why is it that those 6 knew that there was something wrong with what was being passed as supposedly getting rid of illegals? It's not illegals who are suffering. Yes, they are suffering, but ordinary people. When you go now to open a bank account, even you've got a bank account, they're asking you all sorts of questions because you've got a foreign name. When you go to the doctors, they're asking you questions.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, it doesn't matter if you're legal, it's okay. But it gets to a point where it becomes counterproductive.
It does.
What about those who are falsely told they are illegals, who had been here legally, and then they had cancer and treatment was stopped?
Because they are black.
Thank you.
That's it. And people don't realize you are black people. I'm telling you now. If you don't know, you are black. And even if you think you are not black, even if you went to Oxford and speak the Oxford lingo, even if you do, and even if you are in some big job and all of that,
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
earning £100,000 a week, you are still black. Now, when you are black, you have to know that you are looking different from the natives. Be careful. Be careful, be careful. Get a grip. Stop looking down on your brother just because you think you are better off. It doesn't work that way. You have to have community spirit, people.
Yes, community spirit, and you also have to make sure that there's a just system. And just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean you don't fight for it. Because you must make sure that the system is fair. Because then that way, it doesn't matter, as you said, your face is your passport.
That's it.
You might be walking down the street. If you had an accident tomorrow, nobody will know whether you are British or not. So what you want is that emergency, they should look after you before even they know who you are.
Yes.
They shouldn't start rifling through your pockets to find out whether or not you're entitled to treatment.
Yes.
And it's that kind of thing. If you got cancer, the speed is of essence. You need treatment.
You do.
You don't want people now to be going to court, finding out whether or not you are here legally or illegally, whether or not you're entitled or not entitled. It is that kind of thinking that we need to sort of put a stop to. Because we need to also remember, look at the history. Who built the NHS? Who worked in the NHS? Whose money built the NHS? When we look at it, the moral imperative is that actually our people are entitled to use the NHS.
People, you will not believe it, but we've ended.
Oh.
1 hour has just gone by
Very
just
quickly.
like that. Yeah. And it's amazing because sometimes you get into the chats and then the time is up.
Absolutely.
Gosh. I want to thank everyone who's listening on the radio. I'm going to say bye-bye. I'm going to play some music. The people who are still on Facebook and other, you can still listen to it. I'm going to play some music and then we'll talk 5 more additional minutes and then that will be it. I'm going to play you this song that I like. I like it very much. So there you go. It's called Selfish by King Promise. I don't know who he is, but it's a Ghana song. The news will come on. Oh, this song starts slow like this.
Yeah, there's a long gap.
King Promise.
Alexa, song. he says he loves her so much that he's selfish. He wants to be he wants to keep her to himself.
himself.
Selfish. Okay. So now we're gonna give to the people that are listening on Facebook and all of these other places on social media our final word. How are we gonna do it? Or are we gonna bunch box Brexit and fair trade and everything? We haven't talked about GMOs. So next year, that's the first thing we're gonna talk about. Because GMO is very important. People need to be aware of the dangers of GMO. And I'm very interested in that myself.
Yeah,
very,
I
very
think just
interested.
briefly on GMOs, the thing is, the reason why maybe I was so interested in it, Ghana has passed a law to allow GMOs into the country. If you notice in the EU, so talking again about Brexit, the EU hasn't allowed it because a lot of us have campaigned against it. The thing is, GMOs are dangerous. In clinical trials in the laboratory, they found that rats develop huge tumors. Are we waiting for us to get it in 10 years' time? Because some things, it takes time to see the consequences of it. And the problem with having GMO crops is that it cross-fertilizes with the ordinary. How can you keep, like corn, the wind fertilizes. So the GMO will go and affect our ordinary crops.
So,
after a time, you won't have anything but GMOs. So it is a very dangerous thing to put into the system.
So basically, the GMO is not a natural way for crops to grow, and it's poisoned and it's dangerous, and it's causing illness in all the lab rats and everything that
they've
they're
done
using.
so far.
And therefore, we are just inviting illness and trouble onto ourselves. Oh God, why?
But
Why
it's
are
because
we
it's
always
it's
doing
money.
this?
No, it's because it's about money. If you notice the GMOs, what they've also done is that GMO seeds are sterile. So you have to go and buy from them every year. Farmers have always done this thing of when you harvest, you keep some that you're going to plant the next season and you sell the rest. You can't, if you keep GMO seeds, you will get nothing. It will not bear fruit. So partly it's about them capturing or cornering the market. Again, it's about profit before people. It's about that. GMOs, in a way, that's what it's the philosophy behind it. They'll tell you the positive, they can give you a better yield, etc. There are other ways of getting a good yield. There are other ways of farming to get a good yield. I think that for me, GMOs, if I had the choice, I won't buy GMOs. And if you notice in Europe, they have to label it. So, in fact, a lot of people no longer buy soya. Because a lot of soya is GMO.
Yeah, I don't buy soya.
So you buy.
I don't even buy tofu and all of these.
Exactly, because it's soya based.
Yeah, it's soya
but
based.
Either you buy organic and you know the source, or for those who are gluten and they are lactose intolerant, they use oat or almond milk, another type of milk. Avoid GMOs.
Okay, we're finished now. We've got to go before the 43 seconds. So people, thank you so much for listening. Next week is going to be a fun. It will be music and talking and laughing and dancing. I will be dancing on the show. So look forward to it. I'm bringing a few friends. We're going to hop about and do things. It may be good news. It may be okay news. Whatever it is, I will be here prancing around. Prepare for it.
Thank
People, I want you to help me to say thank you to you.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Nana Asante, thank you very much. You've educated, you've helped us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I play